the club. Welcome to today's episode of Hints from HR. I'm Becca Ramati, and I'm here today with my Hints from HR crew, Nicolle Block and Billy Griffin. We're missing Blaze Spitaleri, but he is here in spirit. And we also have my How to Speak partner in crime, Jason Fein. Happy to have you guys all here with me today.
Hey.
Full house.
Full house is right. So this is going to be our last episode of Hints from HR and our last episode of How to Speak Maintenance for 2023. So we wanted to look back and see what we've covered and start to talk about what we see coming in 2024. This year, we started talking about recruiting, training, and retention, which mirrors the type of resources that TAAEF is developing and promoting and putting out there for our TAA members through the Resource Center that we launched early in 2023. So now let's start and jump in and start talking about our recruiting sessions that we've had on the program. We talked to Melissa Rhodes with Graystar about changing the mindset, the hiring mindset, and Kara Rice with Swift Bunny about how recruiting is the new marketing. Nicolle, ladies first, what were some of your takeaways from these episodes and, recruiting challenges and trends and things in general?
Yeah, I think that, all of these, I think they built on each other, right? But the recruiting is the new marketing. That one really spoke to me because one, it's just really reframing that shift. I mean, obviously changing your hiring mindset, you got to get them to the interview first, right? You got to attract them. And so I think by, understanding that the networking opportunities and we're constantly recruiting because we are a representation of our company's brand, whatever that is. You're always showing what your culture is, whether you mean to or not. And so I think recruiting is the new marketing really, kind of changed the way that I intentionally recruit, maybe a little bit different. And I hope that some of the other companies found that to be impactful. And then you get them, into that, then you get them in and then you do the assessment. So I think that kind of having that piece as far as getting them in the door, maybe a little bit differently because it is a totally new landscape of talent. So we have to just attack it a little bit differently. So that's probably the most impactful one I'd say in that group for me.
Yeah. And Jason, on How to Speak Maintenance, we also talked about hiring using maintenance testing and assessments. And that was a great conversation as well. Anything from the maintenance side of hiring that stood out for you?
Yeah, we talked to Sarah Lee Reyna and we talked about the aptitude test like you were talking about. And I liked what you said, Becca, on the call. You mentioned that we shouldn't use aptitude tests and say that as a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty insightful because I think sometimes we can get a little bit locked in and say, if they don't get above a 70, then they can't have the job. And we really dove a lot into how somebody might be a good test taker and they might be a really good score, but then they come in and they can't actually do the job. And then that just sets them up for failure. So that was really insightful during our How to Speak Maintenance call.
A lot of what TAA Education Foundation focuses on is trying to bring new people into the field. So we don't want to handcuff them right away by a test that may or may not be the best indicator for what they can do. Billy, how about you with the supplier side of things?
Again, on the supplier side of things, the whole thing on the training and just bringing people in, we're watching, the millennials come in and they're all instant gratification. They all want it now. And so the fact that we're taking time to train them and onboard them the right way and just get them trained up to kind of what we do and not have those, you may have somebody that doesn't understand the industry, so they don't take the test the right way. That because they're thinking, hey, it's this, and they could be a perfect candidate. I mean, I've heard people like, oh, well, this person tried to beat a culture test, and like, they're a great salesperson. You've talked to them a number of times, but they answered it the way they thought they wanted. People like, this person's not a salesperson. This person is an accounting person. It's like, no, they're not. And you go back to them and go, quit trying to beat the test. Take the test the way you're supposed to. And so I think this is, again, it leads right into the supplier side. The same thing. We're all trying to get, great people, new people, and keep them in. So these every one of these topics were awesome.
Well, I think with the assessments too, just to kind of wrap it up with a bow, I think that they're, like we've talked about, their tools, but when you're looking for potential, we always talk about a culture fit, or we talk about, do they have the right attitude, because we can train everything else. So giving it the correct weight. Now, if you're hiring for, a maintenance supervisor, yeah, they should have some knowledge because they're going to be potentially that teacher for the team. But if you're hiring an entry level, make ready technician, or, kind of gauging, what they can do versus what they are taking the test on, and just using it as a tool. But like you guys said, it's not a barrier necessarily, because we're going to have to train them. So they have everything else. Don't exclude, because, if you hire the person that knows that test, they may be terrible to work with and a total grumpy person, and or someone that's not a team player, but hey, they can fix that refrigerator. I mean, so who cares? They just destroyed your culture.
Good point.
Well, talking about training a little bit more, we had a couple episodes focusing on training. And one of the ones that stood out for me was with Josh Haynes from Madeira. We talked about cross-training your teams. You and Josh and I, and we had a great conversation. What stood out for you about that? And also just the ideas about cross-training teams was interesting. And I don't think everyone does that necessarily.
Well, and similar, like we've talked about too, it's some people see networking as a double-edged sword, right? Because they're like, why am I going to bring all these people to these networking events? Because they're going to get poached. And you're thinking, no, again, this is your calling card and you're getting everything out there. I think sometimes people, as far as cross-training, there's a misconception, right? That it's like, okay, well, why am I doing somebody else's job? Or why are, those types of things. Whereas if you have a strong team that can really understand, one, the perspective of every single one of their team members, they're going to have more empathy. They're going to give more grace, and they're really going to lean in because they understand the contribution. May not know it 100%, but they have an appreciation for it. And then cross training builds stronger teams. And so if you're, if you're woven tightly and this person gets promoted, you still have a tight weave, and then they can grow. And then you just, then you bring in that one person because you've cross trained everyone else to kind of, again, kind of carry the load. But makes room for growth and development. And those are, again, it's somewhat counterintuitive. Like, oh my gosh, what if I cross train them and train them and they leave? Well, what if you don't and they stay, right? So it's like you're not pouring into any of these people. You're just keeping them where they're at, and there's no growth in their learning, engagement, and development. And then you just have this mediocre team forever. We just have to really, again, flip that mindset again, because it's train them and grow them and develop them. And if they leave, okay, great. But they're going to say, hey, Nicolle Block really made some time for me. Maybe you work again with them in the future. You never know. So I think that's what I would say as far as being intentional with the cross training, and again, flipping that script on it and showing how it's a positive, right? Because we need to be more secure in what we're offering so that our teams truly are empowered instead of afraid.
Yeah, that's great. Were you gonna jump in there?
I was going to say it also shows empathy towards the other people, and you have this empathy towards your like, I'm always stuck out doing this until you take the other job and like, wow, I had no idea that they did all these other things. So that's huge.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And also, on the call we talked also about how the burden when someone leaves, if more than one person knows how to do something or understands the function of another person's job, then people can go on vacation, and the burden doesn't always have to fall onto a certain person, which is a big deal, especially as we're all overburdened and doing too many jobs and too much work. So I think it's a great point and a really important point for companies to consider.
Yeah.
We also had Thomas Marmoleo with Camden on to talk about intentional training. I think of this as Nicolle's favorite word, intentionality. But first, I'm going to go to Jason, because we talked a lot the last few episodes of both shows about maintenance training and being very intentional with that. And that lined up really well with TAAEF's launch of a maintenance apprenticeship guide, a training guide that any company, any member can use to develop, to have the framework for a training program. And we spent time on all shows talking about it, and Jason was directly involved. So if you want to give some thoughts on the training program, but also about being intentional with your training, and also what the idea of an apprenticeship can do for a company, as you've seen done with Camden.
Yeah. I feel like everybody is going through that same struggle of we're not getting these highly qualified candidates that are applying for our open positions because everybody's holding on to their very highly qualified candidates and they're treating them well. And so we're getting a lot of these green employees that are new to the industry and they're excited and it's a new adventure for them, but they don't know anything. And I feel like what we've done at Camden, and that's why I love the tool that you built, Becca, is now we can be able to build that pipeline for ourselves. And we can take people that are new to the industry and we can give them an opportunity to dip their toes in the water and be able to see if it's anything that they want to be involved in. And then we get the opportunity to really dig in and see what's do they come to work on time? Are they a great future employee? And so it's kind of like dating. It's like speed dating. And now I get to be able to show them some new skills and I get to get them, introduced to electrical and plumbing and to HVAC. And at the end of the program, then they can be able to determine if they want to stay in it. And we can also be able to look at them and say, you know what, I want to give you a shot. And it's been really awesome because we built the program, we started working with Goodwill, and we started working with some other programs out there. And we're building that pipeline. And we actually had one of our first apprenticeship program graduates. He became a supervisor. He got promoted and became a supervisor. So and that's awesome. It's amazing to be able to see that and to be able to build that pipeline and to help grow people. Because like you said, if you don't spend time with your employees and teach them and train them, then they're going to be stagnant and they're not going to be able to help contribute and they're not going to feel successful. And then that's going to lead into more turnover in the future. So I'm a big fan of the program.
That's great.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, and I would also say too, with the intentionality piece, one of the things we talked about was timing of things and position being more, consistent. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more in the onboarding piece of it, but I think that, the being intentional is not just what you're, delivering to them. It's when do you deliver it to whom and how it's delivered. And I think that, focusing on how people learn and all the different, so I think it was intentionality. We took it to a whole nother broader level. Because it's not just, oh, I'm going to do it this way every single time. You might be being intentional, but are you really being effective? When you're, I might say I'm going to do it every Monday this time. Well, that might not work for Becca. She might start on a Tuesday. She might have Mondays off. I mean, so you just want to be, intentional and be effective. So I think, varying that also with the training is something we brought up that was important.
Yeah,
I think go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add one more thing. In my travels, when I go to properties around the country, it's sad to me when I go and I see a maintenance tech that's been a maintenance tech at that same property for 15 years. And there's something in Houston, and it's sad. Like, what could we have done for that employee 8 years ago or 10 years ago to be able to give them some skills? I could teach somebody how to replace an HVAC unit in a year. I mean, so why that employee should be 10 times better. And I get what you're saying, Nicolle. Like, yeah, it might not be good to set it for every Tuesday, but at least earmark sometime, at least once a month and say, hey, you know what? Once a month, we're going to learn something new. Maybe we call our vendors and they come in for a day and they teach us something. Maybe they can show us how to diagnose a compactor issue, or, maybe somebody can come in and show us something about elevators. And now all of a sudden I'm smarter. And then 10 years down the road, I'm a better employee because of it. So I'm a big fan of training.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, listening to Kobe, who was a guest on How to Speak Maintenance and a graduate of the apprenticeship program, who is now leading the program and training new hires, was so inspirational because he really, he had another job. He was in sales with Coca-Cola and he was doing a lot, but he wanted something more, and he found this program and took a chance on it and on himself. And so listening to him talk about the value that he feels about himself now, having completed that, and what he's doing now is really awesome, and is exactly what we want from these types of programs and for people to feel about being part of this industry.
Yeah.
So moving on to the the retention piece of things, we did a couple episodes about that as well. The first was really with Christy Waddell from AG Living. We talked about onboarding. And we've talked about onboarding before on the show, but this was really, onboarding is not orientation. And I really like that because we talk a lot about how the resident experience in move-in, and Nicolle said this before too, but what about our employees' experience basically moving into the company? And so I think it's a really important issue that we should be doing more for. And I know a lot of companies struggle with getting this piece right, but there were some great things we talked about on that show. Billy, do you want to take this one to start?
Christy Waddell did an amazing job with AG Living. She talked about not just filling out the paperwork, but actually who's following up with them that week, who's following up with them the next day, who's following up with them, a week from now, 2 weeks from now, 3 months from now, a year from now. It is an ongoing process to make sure that the people have their questions answered, because so frequently people get to a place, and we shared some horror stories on this about people showing up and even the person they report to is not even there, and there's no paperwork, and people don't even know that they're starting to work that day. So again, we keep saying be intentional. It's great when you say, what if this, then this, if this, then this, so people know where to turn and they don't feel like they're on an island by themselves the first day, and they've got questions, and feed it to them in the amounts that they can have a resource to come back to, and again, continue to grow and blossom as the employee that you hired that you want to be. So Christy did a great job.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that the piece of it, like calling it out for orientation, I think that really called the industry to the carpet. I think that not just multifamily, I'm sure other industries do it too, but I think too many times we're looking at it to be an orientation, like, hey, here's where you have lunch, the mess hall. It's like, no, it's not. I don't want to know where the mess hall is. I want to, I want to understand the culture. I want to understand, yes, feed me, tell me when my lunch is. I'm a new associate and I need to know what time I'm going to have lunch. But I think that orientation piece, I think by saying that, you're thinking, ooh, yeah, there's an opportunity there. Orientation is very baseline level. Yes, we shared stories, and one of them was mine, that they didn't even know who I was the first day because nobody let them know I was showing up. And I'm like, hi. And some of them knew me from the industry. They're like, what's Nicolle doing here? And I'm like, because I work here now. Yay. So that's obviously baseline. So orientation is better than that. But truly, that's not the experience that we want our associates to have, similar to what I said before with the residents. And so I think that type of intentionality, kind of I hinted to it in the last section, it's like, obviously there's something everyone should get, but then it's going to be the timing, or by position, or are you a new acquisition? You're having to onboard a whole new team of 20 people that are coming on because you bought the property. That's going to look different than someone that comes as a new assistant manager on a stabilized, fully staffed property, and how they enter into your community or your company. So I think that intentionality piece for the onboarding is more like the slice and the dice, and really personalizing the experience. So it's consistent, of course, with your culture, but then specific to the role and the person and the circumstance. Sometimes I think that's something we forget to do, and we're trying to focus on it.
Yeah, that's great.
And like I said, it funnels up to retain. And the goal is, if you do it the right way, we retain them and we keep them. And then we, give them then we went into Deldrick and doing the test and hiring and retaining talent. And that ties right into that piece, to where if you bring them on the right way, and we're doing the right thing, and we're keeping them trained, and we're finding out what they're doing, as you take these tests, you get them in the right spot. They're happier employees, and retain them, and they stay longer, and life is grand.
So Billy is bringing the energy, man. Woo, go Billy. Now I'm ready to go.
Man, I'm feeling it.
So we talked to Deldrick with the Morgan Group about how they're using an assessment tool called Culture Index to hire, but what was really interesting was how they're using it to retain and to keep people happy and growing and learning at their company. And so that was a great segue, Billy, great segue. And we all took the test, and it was really interesting to see, how we work together, how you take a group of people and see who are you missing from your team? What skills or what sort of personality types are you missing? And that was one way that they were using it to better their teams as a whole. Technology like the Culture Index, or how they're using it, reminds me of a few episodes, or of an episode we did with How to Speak Maintenance, Jason, about AI and technology, and how we shouldn't be afraid of it necessarily, but we should look at it as how we can make our jobs easier, especially in maintenance. And that was a great conversation as well.
Yeah, I think that was uh, a great conversation. I think that we were talking about some poster, right, where it was a building that was being constructed and they put that wrap on the outside and it said, "Hey AI, come finish this building." And it was pretty interesting to see that. And but the more and more we talk about AI in our industry, I mean, I see it as being exciting because could we be able to build a tool that says, "Hey, according to service requests and how long it takes Jason to complete appliances, he's the best employee for appliances." And now it could be able to assign me the tickets that I'm really good at. And now I can be more productive versus I'm not good at HVAC and you keep giving me HVAC tickets because we just got to check that box. So it's going to be really interesting once the technology grows and companies feel a little bit safer with it, because I know that a lot of companies are very nervous. I know of some companies that have shut it down and said you can't use AI at work, which I get it, I understand. So,
Well,
but
the billboard that Jason mentioned what basically said, AI can't come and physically finish this building.
right.
So
Right.
don't be afraid of it. Use it to your advantage. And so that's what we talked about on that. But in everything that we've talked about, using technology for systems and processes like onboarding, like training, like the Microsoft Planner that Camden uses for the apprenticeship program, they all can play a role. So it may not be the level at AI that we're thinking of or people might be afraid of, but just using the tools that we have to make our jobs and our lives easier at this point, sort of a no-brainer.
I'm glad you brought up that planner. I wanted to hit on that because you guys were talking about onboarding. And so that planner that Thomas built, that's actually based off of the apprenticeship program. We built that program first and we used it for our apprenticeship program because we realized that those first 90 days are important. If you have a technician that joined your company, they probably applied for more than one job. So they probably have multiple applications out there. And so you're the first one that gave them a job, and then their onboarding, their first day experience is they came in and it was, "Oh my goodness, thank you so much for joining. We've been swamped. Here's keys and here's a bunch of service requests," which, by the way, that was my first day in the industry. And
Nice.
yeah, and if that's your first industry and it's not fun, then all of a sudden one of those other companies calls up and says, "Hey, we really need you. Here's a buck more." They might leave for that dollar more. And so you're bringing them in, but you might not retain them. And so it's really important. And I'm glad you brought up technology, trying to form a way to be able to get the people in, let them be comfortable. And some of our supervisors aren't great trainers. So having this tool that says, "Hey, in the first week, here's the things you do with this employee. In the second week, here's the things. Don't swamp them and give them everything all in day one." I think it's
Great point. So looking ahead to 2024, we know the last few months of the year always go like that, go so quick. What do we think we're going to see? What are going to be the trends, particularly around our employees, and what do we see coming? Nicolle, you want to hit that first?
Yeah, I know for sure. So what do we see coming? My crystal ball, right?
Yes.
But I think that I think like similar, like we're talking about with AI, I think we're also looking for other ways to be more efficient just for what we do. So I've heard a lot about centralization potentially coming back into the fold. I know a lot of companies did it 20 plus years ago, but it was a building where all of the accounting assistant managers went, right? Well, now we don't need a building. They can do everything remotely for the most part. So a lot of companies are kicking back again. I've seen several that are kind of centralizing some of their practices. So I think we probably will see more of that. But I also say, even though we all feel like, oh my gosh, end of the year budget's crazy, as far as community selling, company selling, a lot of things aren't changing hands right now. And we've got lots of things going on, an election year next year. We've got, we talk about interest rates and stock markets, and it is uncertain as it is now. I think this is the calm before the storm. And so I would say in 2024, like we're going to see potential companies being purchased, I think, or like larger portfolios, because all of those 3-year, bridge loans and variable, the mortgage rates, all of those are coming up due in 23 and 24, or the interest only loans, et cetera. So I think we're going to see kind of a calm and then just lots of chaos. And so that's my prediction. I don't know when the chaos is going to come. I'm saying Q2, but I think we're going to, of course, see a crazy December with all those last minute, 1030 exchanges. But I think it's the calm before the storm. And I think that that's something that we're going to see probably a very busy 24, just with a lot of, just shifts, right? As far as companies, and that means people too, because people are going to shift at the same time. So I would say the efficiencies with maybe centralization. And then I think that 24 is going to be a very active year with transactions.
Jason?
Yeah. You always need people to turn wrenches. So it's hard to, centralize maintenance. What I've heard in the industry and from my partners, friends that are out there is that we're going to keep trying to find new ways to be able to maybe group properties together, so we can be able to share on call systems, or we could be able to share employees. One of the things I'm interested in is between 2 or 3 properties, could you set up a group of people that are just focused on preventative maintenance work? And now all of a sudden I've got a crew doing tickets and turns, and I've got somebody that's solely focused on preventative maintenance. I think that's going to be a really interesting thing that's going to transpire over the next couple of years. One of the things that I know our company's been challenged with is the single family home companies came along and they took a lot of maintenance employees from us. And one of the things that they're offering them is no on call and no weekends. And we can't compete with that. It's difficult. We've tried to figure out ways to skin that cat, but that cat is a wiry little one. So we had to go back and say, what are we calling our maintenance employees for? And I think a lot of companies are doing that, is saying, hey, what can I do to help my maintenance employees sleep? Is there a policy or procedure? Or can I train my residents? There's self-help tools that we can give the residents, to be able to help themselves, or just be able to stabilize things until in the morning. But at some point in time, we do know that you're gonna have to get woken up and come back to the property because it's a fire. So it's interesting. It's really making people stop and pause and think about what's going on and how we can improve the lives of our maintenance employees while continuing to treat our customers the best way we can. I think one of the biggest topics next year is going to be the new Freon, and how we need to train our employees, because it's new tools, it's new equipment, it's flammable, there's all these new stories. There's 2 different types right now, and they're competing, and nobody knows what's going to win in the end. And it's fun. But it's now all of a sudden you're going to have if you have a 20+ year old property, you might have 4 different types of Freon at that property. And now labeling.
I have that actually at a campus of 4. It has different refrigerant. Yeah. I mean, it's just, it's a bear, but we're living it now.
Yeah. It's going to continue to get worse. And, when 410 rolled out, everybody's like, oh, we're just going to get rid of R22, so now we've got R22, you got MO99, you got 410, and now you're going to have this new Freon. So training and educating and staying organized is going to be really important. And the office can really help us with that and that partnership. So
thanks, Jason. Billy?
Yeah, I'll go quickly. I know on the supplier side, we live in off of y'all's world. We have meetings with you all. We try to find out what y'all's plans are. And this time of the year, everybody's saying, hey, next year is an election year. And as you just said, air conditioning has gone up. Taxes have gone up. Insurance has gone up. Labor has gone up. I mean, everything has gone up. And as you talk to folks, people are saying they're pumping the brakes, looking at projects in the first quarter, maybe even some of the second quarter. So I'm going to agree with Nicolle 100%. I'm thinking second quarter or third quarter, there's going to be some chaos, and it's going to be what is that chaos? Is it properties going back? Is it people saying, hey, we now have the money we've got to spend by next year, let's get things going? And as suppliers, we kind of just, again, keep our ear to the pavement and kind of listen to what our customers are doing, and we try to react accordingly. I mean, there's times where you'll bid something and you're like, oh, this is coming definitely in March of this next year. And all of a sudden it's not till June. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're continuing to watch trends and watch the market, and we're not going to make that big CapEx expense right now. So, definitely exciting year, presidential year, you said it's going to be exciting.
Well, multifamily is never boring, and it is never boring being with you guys. It is an honor to get to work with you twice a month. And I appreciate you all and Blaze so much. And we'll keep everyone posted on when we're back, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
Happy
Thanks so much.
holidays. See you in 2024.